Ziv.
Okay. All right, I'm going to start with the sponsors, and hopefully that will give the other guys a chance to get on. Okay. Year of Learning by Dr. Paul Koningsberg. In memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Labush, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara Nissen ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. Friends of Toby Peres, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov. Friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef. Friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon. Cheryl Sher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva. Marcia Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Oriel Paul Federbush, Oriel ben Harav Shimon. A Week of Learning, sponsored by Michael and Judy Poretsky, in memory of his brother, Avram ben Gershom. A Day of Learning, sponsored by Alan and Andy Stowis, in memory of his father, Menachem Mendel ben Avram Nassan. Also a Day of Learning, sponsored by Sydney and Lydia Semmel, in memory of his mother, Chana bat Shmaya. May the Shamas have an aliyah, Krank Rafia Vel the Yashir Shem Atliya, L'chol B'nai Yisrael a good Gaben Shkia.
Amen.
Okay. All right. I'm going to have a start from the bottom of Lamed at Amud Beis. Okay. About just a couple lines up, okay? From the bottom, okay? We see there's a discussion going on between Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak and Rav Chia bar Avin, okay? And in that discussion, okay, he responds to him after he's explained the whole discussion, okay, about what he meant by refuting a Kal V'chomer and whether the death penalty was for Me'ila. The Gemara now says that Rav Nachman responds, okay, he says to him, right, V'amar le tanuach datach Shenachta et dati. Okay, that may your mind be at ease, for you've placed my mind at ease. V'amarle, and he says to him, my nechuta, right? What was the reason that you were at unease, beset by difficulties with her? The Rav of Rav Sheshet Shadu Bey Narga. We pointed out at the bottom of Lamed Bet Amud Beis, last line, that it was colloquial phrase, they swung an axe at him. In other words, they objected to what he was saying. And they said to him, right, Man shamat le, the amar hezid b'me'ila b'mita. Who was it that they said, or that you learned, that one who committed me'ila deliberately, right, would be have the death penalty? So it gives us now, continuing on Lamed Gimel, Lamed Aleph on the top, Rebbe. We saw this yesterday, that it was Rebbe, the Tanya Hezid b'me'ila, Rebbe Omer b'mita, b'chachamim omrim b'hazhara, that if one deliberately committed an act of me'ila, according to Rebbe, he was punished with the death penalty from heaven. Okay, and the rabbis disagreed and said he was punished with a warning. Okay, because and with a warning, as a result, his punishment would be malchus.
Right.
Okay, so the Gemara. So we're picking up now where we left off yesterday. Okay, third line on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph.
My time of the Rebbe.
Right, my Talmud the Rebbe. What was Rebbe's reasoning? Okay, who claimed this? Amar Rabbi Abahu. Rabbi Abahu responds, Gamar chet mitruma. Okay, that Rebbe used a gzera shava, okay, in this case of the same word chet, okay, in two different places from the example of truma. Okay, and now, of course, the Gemara is going to share that gzera shava with us. Ma truma b'mita, af me'ila b'mita. Okay? That the same way, okay, one could be punished by eating a non-Kohen, punished b'mezid, right, would get koret, mita b'yedei shemayim. So he learned the same thing for me'ila. Okay, umina, okay, and from that, ma truma b'kazayit, the same way that the measurement for truma, okay, has to be of certain volume of a kazayas, af me'ila b'kazayas. So likewise, the same measurement of an olive's volume has to apply for me'ila. Now, umat kifla Rav Papa. Rav Papa, however, okay, challenges this statement, okay, and in doing so, he's going to defend Rav Chia bar Avin, okay, namely the following: Mimai de Rebbe karabanan svirale. On what basis can you say, right, that the Rebbe holds like the rabbis? Dilma ka Abba Shaul svirale. Maybe he holds like Abba Shaul. Amar, who said, Yesh b'shave pruta, afal gav dalit kazayit. Okay, that he had, that Rabbi Abba Shaul said you had to have the value, financial value of a pruta, even though you did not have the volume of a kazayas. Okay. Vaha, Rav Papa hu da Amar da Abba Shaul tarte bai. But wasn't it Rav Papa himself, we're saying, who was the one who indicated to us earlier that Rav Papa required both the volume of a kazayas and the financial value of a shava pruta. Elishma mina hadarbe. But rather we learned from there that case that Rav Papa recanted, okay, from that position. Okay. Now, Mar Bere de Rava, Amar. So we're trying to see now a different explanation, okay, of the back and forth between Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak and Rav Chia bar Avin. Okay, and Mar, the son of Rabbana, gives the following: Hachi ka'amar. This is what he means to say. Lo, okay, that's not, okay, the case. Im amat b'shar mitzvot shelo asa behen she'ein mitkavein k'mitkavein. If you're talking about the fact, okay, that in other commandments, one who did it without intent is similar to one who did it with intent, right? Okay, or did it unintentional, right? She'im nitkavein lachtoch et hatalosh. That if, for example, one intended to cut something that was loose already, unattached, v'chatach et ha'mechuba, and cut something that was still attached, shepatur, that the person is exempt.
Because Einem is covered.
Right? Tomar b'me'ilah, are you prepared to say, I'm translating it, that with regards to Me'ilah, she'im nitkavein lehitchamem begizei chulim, that if one's intent was to heat up the item, to warm himself, okay, using shells, pieces of chulin, okay, right, v'nitchamem begizei ola, and wound up instead warming himself or warming something with the cuttings, the pieces of an ola, shema'al, that he committed me'ilah. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak amar, hachi ka'amar. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak also is going to try to make an explanation, and in doing so, adjust the language of the Braita. No, that's not the case. Imamart b'shar mitzvot shekein lo mitchayev bahen she'ein mitasek k'mitasek. If you're going to say that with regards to the other commandments of the Torah, okay, that in this case, one is not going to become obligated or liable when they aren't aware of their actions, that's the same as when someone is aware of their actions. She'im nitkavein lahagbia et talush. For example, if one's intended action was to lift up something that was disattached, right? V'chatach et hamechubar, and instead severed something that was attached, that he's exempt. Tomar b'me'ilah, are you prepared to say again regarding me'ilah, she'im hoshit yado l'kli litol chayfetz, that if he stretched forth his hand to pick something up, right, to grab some sort of object, right, v'sach yado b'shemen shel kodesh, and by doing so, it happened that he anointed his hand with a consecrated oil, okay, shema'al, that he committed an act of me'ilah, okay. Amar ma, said the master, what are we talking about here? Okay. B'med varim amurim, b'mafrish truma v'hechmitza. No, our case initially was that one had, when we talked about truma chametz, what are we dealing with? We're talking about truma that had been taken, had been set aside, and while it was set aside, before the owner got to utilize it, it became chametz.
All right, honey, I'll see you in a while.
Okay. Aval hifrish chametz truma. But we say that if he actually put aside chametz truma, divrei hakol eina kedusha, according to everyone, it's no longer consecrated. So Gemara asks the Shaila as follows: Minahani mili.
Where do we know that?
Where do we know this from? On what basis is these words? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar Kra. Says it's based on a pasuk. Titain lo, that you have to give it to him, namely to the Kohen. Velo le'oro, and not necessarily for his fire, for his burning. Okay? In other words, you can't designate the quality of the chametz truma if it's worthless, given to him during the holiday. Okay? And even if you hold like Rabbi Yossi agreed, that said he can use it for benefit, by giving him that kind of truma, the only thing it's going to be good for is burning. He can't use it for eating. Okay? And so going on then, Meitiv Rav Huna bereid Rav Yoshua. Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yoshua, challenges Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak's explanation. Ein tormin minat me'ah l'tohara. But we have a concept that says one cannot, in a Mishnah, separate truma that is tameh for the benefit of truma that is tahor. And what happens? V'im taram b'shogeg. But if he did it by inadvertently, by accident, okay? Truma to truma. Then we can consider it a valid truma. Va'amai, and what's the basis for this? Lema lo. You want to say, shall we say that it says to him, velo la'oro, and not for his fire, not for his burning? Lo kasha. We don't have to say that this is a problem. Why? Hatam haita lo sha'ata kosher. Because that truma initially, originally, did have a time when it was valid, because it was truma that was separated and then became chametz. Whereas if you give him truma chametz itself, truma that's already chametz during the holiday, hacha, that's what we're saying, lo haita lo sha'ata kosher. It did not have any opportunity or time in which it was valid, in which it was usable. Udelo haitelo shata kosher hechidami. And if you're saying that it didn't have any time that it was a fitting or proper, what do you mean by that? Right? How is that possible? Kigon da'achmitz b'mechubar. For example, it was a situation where it became leavened or chametz while it was still attached. Aval achmitz v'talish. But if it became chametz while it was disattached, hachanami dekedsha. Here too, shouldn't in that case it have become consecrated? Amarle. And he responds to him and says to him the following, Ein b'gzerat irin pitgama u'ma'amar kadishin she'ilte. This again, citing a pasuk from Daniel, I believe, right? Which is he saying basically, by the decree of the angels. What do we mean, decree of the angels? Pitgama, a colloquial expression again, is what we're talking about. Ubama'amar kadishin she'ilte. L'chein morin b'bei midrasha kivate. Namely, what we're talking about is a ruling by the word of the holy ones, the rabbis. Not only that, and also that was the way it was taught in the base medrash, according to my ruling. Now, says the Gemara, Ki ata Rav Huna, Berei de Rav Yehoshua. When Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua, came, right? And, Art Scroll has a note there, by the way. Even though he was there during the entire discussion. So there's a question of why does it say he came? But our purpose is that he gives a comment. Amar Kra. He says there's a pasuk. And the pasuk says, Amar Kra Reshit. Namely, if you give the Kohen Reshit, the first of your gathering, right? That means that there's got to be something left over. And it's got to be worthwhile, what's left over. Shashioreha nikarim liYisrael. That what's left over then has to be distinguishable, permissible for the Israelite. Yatzta zo she'ein shioreha nikarim. Therefore, that excludes, whatever leftovers from what was given to the Kohen, if it's not recognizable, I can use that word, or distinguishable, to be utilized by the Israelite. And therefore, it's not also a valid truma. Now, Gemara wants to tell us at this point, Okay, some further discussion on this aspect of the Braita. Yativ Rav Acha bar Rav Avya, Kame de Rav Chista. Rav Acha bar Rav Avya was sitting before Rav Chista. V'yativ v'amar mishmei de Rabbi Yochanan. So they were sitting and repeating or learning. Okay, and he recited the following in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Anavim shenitma'u. If you have grapes that became tameh, darchan pachot mikababetza, that one can stomp on them. I'll use that word, okay, press them, okay, somewhat less than the equivalent of an egg's volume, okay, at a time, right? V'yenam kasher l'nesachim, and that wine that's produced, okay, notice from tameh grapes,
Right.
is still viable, still kosher to use for libations. Alma, therefore, what does that tell us? Kasavar mashkin mivkad pekide comes to tell us here a concept. Okay, the concept deals with where the juice of the item is found. Is the juice found inside of the fruit in sort of little, I'll call it cubicles, containers? Okay, or is the juice found throughout the entire piece of fruit? Okay, we're not talking practically here, but conceptually. Okay, so it's saying, if he says that that tameh fruit can still be pressed, okay, and its juice is viable for libations, it seems he says to tell us that he holds that the fruit is in, if you will, little containers. Okay, le'emat kamitame. Okay, so we ask the question then, how then is it possible then for the juice to become tameh? Lechi sachit laho, because when it comes to squeezing it, right? Lechi sachit laho, lite l'shi'ure, says the Gemara. But when you ultimately squeeze it, if you say each time you stomp it, press it, it has to be less than the amount of an egg, then the point is it doesn't reach a valid shiur. Ihachi, if that's the case, kibeitza nami, right? Then maybe even if you squeeze it out to the amount of an egg, there also it wouldn't be problematic, right? The hatnan, because isn't it taught elsewhere there in a Mishnah, the following, tameh mate, if a person who has become tameh by having contact with a mace, right? If that contaminated person from a corpse, shesachad zeitim va'anavim kebeitza mechuvenet, and they squeezed from olives and grapes the exact amount of an egg volume, tahorim, then that juice is acceptable. It's not contaminated. Hatam, says the Gemara, there in that case, de'i avad, okay, that's b'di'avad, right? That's after the fact. Hacha l'chadchila. But here we're talking about a situation ab initio, as they say, initially. Gezerah dilma ati leme'abad yoter mikabetza. What? Because we're concerned lest the person produce, okay, inadvertently more than the egg volume amount. Squeeze more than that amount. Now, Amarle Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda says to him in response, Man siat lach ula Rabbi Yochanan Rabach. Who's going to listen to you and to Rabbi Yochanan, your teacher, in regards to this? V'chituma shebahen lahechan halcha. If you said these grapes were tameh, where did that tuma go? Okay, did it suddenly disappear? Alma, therefore, kasavar, he must be of the opinion, mashkin mevlai baliyeh, that the juice of the fruit is totally throughout the fruit, contained throughout the entire fruit. Okay? V'kevan de itmulei uchla, itmulei mashkin. And once since we say that the fruit, the food stuff itself has become tameh, likewise, the juice has become tameh. Amale. So he says to him back, Va'at lo tisbara de mashkin mifkad pekide. You're not of the opinion that in regards to the juice, it's sort of self-contained, I'll use that word, okay, inside the fruit. Vahatnan. But aren't we taught elsewhere in another Mishnah? Tamei mate, again, the person who was in contact with a corpse, shesachat zaitim va'anavim, and they squeezed olives and or grapes, mechavenet kabetza, to the exact amount of an egg volume, tahorim, that juice is tahor. I amrat b'shlema mifkad b'kidei, mishum hachi tahorim. If you're going to say then that the juice is self-contained, so to speak, in little sections of the fruit, then it seems reasonable to argue that juice is tahor. Ela I amrat mivlah bili'eh. If you're going to say that the juice is throughout the entire piece of fruit, amai tahorim. Why then would you say, okay, that it is tahor? Amale, so he responded, Hacha b'mayas kinan. Here then, what are we talking about? Ba'anavim shelo huchsharu. We're talking about the fact that the grapes were such that they weren't prepared through some liquid to become tameh. La'emat b'tachshireh. Okay, so we ask then if that's the case, right? At what point then, okay, might they become prepared for accepting truma? L'chisachid laho. Once they become squeezed. Chisachid laho, batzir laho shiora. But he argues back, but when you squeeze them, they lose the appropriate measure. They become less than an egg's worth. De'ilo temahachi. Because if you don't say that, ha detanya, what about the fact that it was taught in a braita? Ha lama zedome, what is this comparable to? Letrumat tutin v'zeitin, to truma of berries and olives, okay, va'anavim and grapes, shenit ma'a, that became tameh, she'en lo ba lo heter achila v'lo heter hasaka, that as a result it has no permission, said Abraita, for either eating or for burning. Ha, in our case, heter achila nami itbe. In this case, even permission for eating exists. The ibai darich laho pachot mikabeitza. Why? Because it was necessary to say, okay, that when you stop the grapes, right, you press the grapes, you press each time less than the amount of an egg. Now, what happens? Based on all of this discussion, okay, we see the following. Amar Rava. Rava wants to defend at the position of Rabbi Yochanan. Gzera dilma ate baholi date kala. Maybe this was a decree that was made lest one come to a obstacle of transgression. In other words, that you may have thought this was acceptable, forgot that the grapes or whatever were tameh, and use it for drinking or whatever. Okay. Amar le Abaye. And so Abaye disagrees and says, Umi chayshinan letikala, do we normally, I'm putting in that word, question the possibility, are we regularly concerned about the perhaps of a transgression? Vahatanya, but isn't it taught in a Braita? Madlikin bapat, that it's permissible to use bread as a source of kindling, right, of lighting, ubashemen shel truma shenit mate, and also use oil, truma oil that's become tameh, okay, and therefore one derives benefit from it. Amarle, Rava responds, Pat zarik le bein ha'etzim. The bread, okay, says, you can throw that in among the wood using it as fuel. Shemen shel truma, okay, and the oil of truma. Okay, what about that situation? Rami le b'kli ma'us. People put it into a disgusting container. And so when they see this container, they know that oil, okay, is to be used only for lighting and not necessarily for anointing or for drinking or food or things like that. So the Gemara now wants to come back and examine this particular statement. Gufa. Let's come back and look at this. Madlikin bepat, we said that we can kindle with bread, ubeshemen shel truma shenitmeit, and with oil, truma oil, that has become tameh. Abai Amar, right, what? Abai says to us, in this case, Mishmei de Chizkiah. This is in the name of Chizkiah, right? Rava Amar, Debei Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Marta. And Rava gave his view based on the academy of Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Marta, right? Amar Rav Huna, in the name of Rav Huna. Lo shanu elapat. They said in this case, this rule dealt with the exception of the bread, aval chite, but in regards to kernels of wheat, lo, that's not the case. Shema yavo behenli deit kala, lest it happened that using wheat kernels, okay, one would burn them, okay, in other words, and as a result, eat later the roasted kernels, forgetting that that was inappropriate, that it was tameh. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, afilu chiti. And Rabbi Yochanan said that the rule does apply to the roasted wheat kernels of truma, okay? That they can be used for kindling. Va'amai, why is that the case, right? Nichush Dilma ate, right? Because we're going to assume for the moment, okay? Should we be concerned? Ate by Hanley date kala? Should we be concerned lest someone do a transgression through them by burning these wheat kernels, lest we think they forget that they're tameh and wind up eating them? Kidda amar Rav Ashi. Gemara answers, and we'll go over just a little bit, as was said by Rav Ashi, namely, b'shlikata umeista. Okay? What happened was that these kernels were first boiled, okay? And then, as a result, that made them disgusting. And therefore, since they're disgusting, they could be tossed in as part of kindling for the firewood. Hachanami, here too, b'shlikata umeista. Here too, we're talking about a situation that Rabbi Yochanan has said the kernels were first boiled, since they were tameh, right? They were first, couldn't be used normally, so they were boiled, and then, as a result, disgusting and could be used as kindling, right? Okay, and that's, okay, now, what's going to happen is the Gemara is going to pick up, okay, to clarify Rav Ashi's explanation. Okay, so let's just go. We've got a couple minutes to pick this up. Vehecha, since tomorrow is the fast day, a little longer davening, right? Vehecha itmar de Rav Ashi. And where was this explanation of Rav Ashi given? Ahad amar Rabbi Avin bar Rav Acha amar Rabbi Yitzchak. It was based on an incident that was stated by Rav Avin bar Rav Acha in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak. Abba Shaul was the Gaval, okay? He was the Gabal, the one who kneaded the dough, okay? Shabbat Rabbi Haya. He was the one, maybe the chief baker, or he was the one in charge of the dough, kneading the dough in the house of Rebbe. Vahayu mechamin lo chamin bechitin shel truma tmeya. And they used to heat up the water that he would use, right? Using, and the source of heating the water, the fire, was using truma kernels of wheat that were tameh. Okay, lalush bahen esa b'tahara amai. You're saying that they used that kind of source of heat, okay, to heat the water in order to make tahor, pure dough? Is that really the case? Okay. Nichush dilma ate baholi de tikala. Shouldn't we be suspect that perhaps this would result in some kind of transgression? Amar Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, b'shlikata umeista. Okay, what happens, he said, was that in that case too, they took those tameh kernels of wheat, they boiled them first, they made them so disgusting, as a result, no one would ever want to eat them, and therefore that's how they could be used as kindling for make fire in that case. And that's where we're going to stop right there. Okay.
Thank you very much.
The Gemara then goes on in a little different direction. Okay, everybody?
Thank you very much. Zev Kipperman, how are you? How are you feeling?